welcoming people as they come in. Welcome to tonight's event. You will notice that our chat box is open, so if you'd like to join in the chat, make sure that when you send your messages, your chat is set to all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, you will be speaking only to people who will not answer you. But if you set it to all panelists and attendees, you can feel free to chat throughout. Please also note that we have the Q&A box open at the bottom. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the event. So anytime you are ready and something pops into your head, feel free to drop it in there and we're going to get to as many questions as possible. So welcome again. Feel free to say hello in the chat. Maybe tell us what you're reading. Tell us if we should read it. And yes, get acquainted with the room. All right, yes, welcome. We are also excited. This is a really good way to kick off December, I think. Also, if anyone can hear sort of like weird dragging noises in my background, it's just a cat doing cat things, so don't worry about it. Welcoming people again. Again, we do have the chat open. Make sure that you set your chats to all panelists and attendees if you want to talk amongst yourselves. And as soon as you have questions, even now, you can go ahead and drop those into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you purchased a book, I'll just let you know now, we'll be sending those out right after the event. And if you haven't purchased a book, both of the titles that we're talking about, Sam's incredible book that we are launching, and also Andrea's recent book, Master of Poisons, both fantastic. And if you like one, you truly ought to like both. So I'll be linking those books in the chat so that you can reconsider the life choices you may not yet have thoroughly thought through. All right, and I think we are going to get going, although I suspect more people will turn up. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. My name is Alex, and I'm the events director at Brookline Booksmith. We're really happy to have you here for our shared launch of Sam J. Miller's The Blade Beneath, here in conversation with Andrea Hairston. If you're familiar with Brookline Booksmith, we are an independent bookstore in Brookline, Mass. We've been there since 1961. So things are a little bit different this year in 2020. We're really excited that we can invite people into our community that otherwise would never get to meet us. So thank you for coming here for the first time. And if you know us well, welcome back. Thank you for being part of us and for supporting the authors and an independent bookstore with your purchases and your attendance. As I said, the chat and question box are open, so feel free to make use of those. Remember, if you'd like to chat to your fellow attendees, to set your chat to all panelists and attendees in that small drop-down menu. Otherwise, you will be sending them only to the panelists who may not be able to see those while they're speaking. If you have any questions, you can start right away putting those into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will be doing a Q&A at the end of the event, so feel free to line those up and we'll get to as many as possible. Please note that Brookline Booksmith has a strict policy against abusive behavior and language, and at our discretion, any attendee can be removed from an event for partaking in such behavior. So tonight, I'm really pleased to introduce two authors whose speculative fiction is both dreamlike and grounded in detail and gravity. And otherwise, their books are very, very different, but there's a sort of mythological realness to both of them that makes this a really great conversation in the making. Moderator Andrea Hairston is the Louise Wolfe Kahn Professor of Theater and Professor of Africana Studies at Smith College, the founder of Chrysalis Theater, and the author of much-lauded fantasy novels We'll Do Magic for Small Change, Redwood and Wildfire, Mindscape, and Master of Poisons. Her work is atmospheric, anti-colonialist, challenging, and I can tell you from experience that a decade of distance between yourself and the reading of any one of her books won't dull the feeling of having read it in the slightest. So I'm really happy to have her here with her critical capabilities sharing in this conversation tonight. Meanwhile, we are here to celebrate the release of Sam J. Miller's most recent book. Sam J. Miller is the author of short stories as well as the YA and adult novels The Art of Starving, Blackfish City, Destroy All Monsters, and launching tonight, The Blade Between. The most effective and successful fantasy includes magic, not just because it's fun and interesting to play with, which it obviously is, but because it satisfies something about ourselves and our perceptions, makes them better illuminated or else more luminous. And of course, the mark of any good writer is that whether or not you can tell whose work has steered them, they occupy a unique voice and position that no one else has quite managed to capture. Sam's books have been awarded and nominated innumerable honors in a very brief period of time, already a really flourishing career with many different books that are very, very different from each other. But the most memorable thing about them is the sense that they give the reader of one small character walking slowly forward in the dark, and you know that there are creatures around them, and you know that they have one light in their hand that will show them the way forward. And that kind of focus and character draws you through everything that he can imagine. His focus in mythology, creativity, and love for his stories mashes the godly up against the mortally frail, and the results are not at all anyone else's books. So today we're excited to share in the launch of The Blade Between, a novel of rural gentrification, the loss of industry, the alienation from one's home, and the powers that stir beneath. Some of them social issues maybe, but some of them definitely monsters. It is a pleasure to have Sam with us tonight. Please welcome Sam and Andrea with your best chat box welcome.
Hey.
Thank you.
So they're now applauding us. We just can't hear it. So it is such a treat to be here to talk about your book, and also the book as part of the wonderful work that you have sent out in the world. I thank you very much for that lovely introduction to both of us. And I just wanted to start like where you start the book with the Baldwin quote. And I'm a big James Baldwin fan. The quote is, "But it is not permissible that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime." And, that's such a, powerful statement. And I'm like, wow, like it takes a lot to start with Baldwin and then get better. That's what I thought. Like, this is Baldwin, and then you take it and you just go all the way. And, I read all of Baldwin, I can't remember it all, but I have done it. And there was nothing like this that he did. And so I, as inspiration, and then you made this book. So, I don't know that you were inspired necessarily by that quote, but the quote captures something that you're working on in this book. And I thought maybe you could talk to us a little about that.
Sure. Well, I'll start off by saying I had some real trepidation about using that quote, because if you're going to invoke James Baldwin, you can't F it up. You have to write a decent book to go along with it. I feel like, first of all, in a totally unrelated and bizarre coincidence, it came across my feed that this is actually the 33rd anniversary of James Baldwin's passing, which is a strange cosmic coincidence. But I feel like one of the things that I love so much about James Baldwin, and the thing that I was trying to capture in this book, and that I feel like I'm probably trying to capture in everything I do, is the way he captures how we live history in ourselves, how we, the horrors of the past, the horrors of the present, the hate, the ignorance, the violence, the exploitation, how those live in us and we carry them forward, and they inform our interactions with people. They shape, they deform our relationships. They prevent us from seeing ourselves clearly. So certainly, that's at the heart of what I do generally, and what I was trying to do here. And that quote, I spent 15 years as a community organizer in New York City working on issues of housing and homelessness and gentrification and displacement. And one of the things that I realized makes it so hard for people to have conversations about gentrification is because people feel like, wherever they stand on the issue, on whatever side of it is they are, they didn't feel like they didn't do anything wrong, right? If you're a wealthier person who's moving to a neighborhood that's transforming, you just are a person.
You just bought it. You didn't. Yeah, exactly. You didn't do this. You're not part of the setup, right?
Exactly. And so people get people get hurt feelings, and it's hard to talk about like the role you might play in neighborhood transformation because you yourself feel like you didn't do anything wrong. so that dichotomy of you didn't do anything wrong, but you're part of a dynamic of oppression or harm, makes it hard to have that conversation. And it's something I was trying to dive into with the sort of the way that resistance to gentrification plays out in this book.
Yeah, well, I think one of the most difficult things is, like responsibility. Am I responsible for the system that I've inherited? Right. And so, does the history that happened before and is still living in, all around me, like everything I do is based on that history. But I didn't make those choices. I just like landed here. And I think horror is one of the best ways to deal with that, so, and things that James Baldwin wrote were really, about the horrific, but he didn't really do horror as a genre. So, and I think that's, I think part of the fun of the book is that you get to take, the horror and manifest it, of a system, of a history, of, things that, we can't quite see. Most of the time, like when you're talking about gentrification, we can't see the things that we have done or are doing or are part of or stand on. I think you do that in this great thriller ghost story that someone said, I think when I was thinking about it, I saw someone say that it was like James Baldwin meets Stephen King. Someone has said that.
That's all I want. That's all I want as an artist. Like, I don't know. I've never thought of that, but once I heard that, I was like, oh, that's. I can stop now. That's all.
Yeah.
I need to hear.
Yeah. I mean, but for me, the fun of horror is, and I say fun, is that I get to go to these intense, dark places and then, physicalize them, manifest them, deal in them. So why do you write horror? I'm just, because I think I first met you, ReaderCon, you were getting an award. You were getting the Shirley Jackson Award.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So like, yeah, like, why write horror and thrillers and all of that stuff?
I mean, first of all, I've been a horror fan my whole life. My poor mother is also a horror fan and tried her best to stop me from watching horror movies and reading horror books, but she also really liked them, so she would sort of relent. So I've always been a fan, and part of it is just like, that's the way I feel the world is. Like, I will often, like my husband keeps trying to tell me that there are no werewolves and I should not be afraid of werewolves attacking me when I'm like walking home from the subway at night, but I don't know that's true. So I do feel like horror is real and the monsters are definitely out there, but I also feel like, monsters give us a great way to talk about horrors that are more difficult to talk about. And, I think of like the ways in which great horror throughout history has used the sort of like ghosts and monsters and vampires to talk about things people are afraid of. And as a Jewish person, I've always felt like Dracula is a story about a wasp who's afraid of Jews coming to England, and that the sort of like Eastern European blood-sucking menace. So part of it is that, and part of it is like, as a queer person, often the only time queerness was seen in horror was in the form of the monstrous. And in the form of Dracula or Norman Bates in Psycho or Ursula in The Little Mermaid.
Right.
That
and often coded and cloaked at the
yes.
same time as clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So that we would, certainly when I was young and coming to terms with my sexuality, when queerness in media was not where it is now, that was who I saw, that was what I saw. So I've always identified with monsters at the same time as I'm convinced they're all around us and I'm terrified of them.
And then writing with them, you can explore all of that. You can share it with us, because I think the other thing about horror to me is that it's actually about being vulnerable, right? In a world like, I think, when we got introduced, the whole idea of the character with the little light, right? The character who is not in control, the character who has to deal with forces beyond them and admits that, right? And, you know, after like all the adventures that they go through. So that the power that a monster has, and that power is something you have to negotiate, you know. And I think some people feel like they can get through life without negotiating with monsters. I don't know how, like, yeah, I didn't grow up that way. I'm a little older than you. Definitely, you know, I grew up in the 50s and 60s. So definitely, you know, monsters were out there. And, you know, I think the rage that one has too is part of the monster reality. So, you know, I think this book is also about rage and anger. And I think horror also is a way to access, you know, a way of talking about that. Like, you know, so I think that's what you're doing in the book. This is, you know, really, you know, like an exploration of anger and hate, and, you know, what it does to us, and what it allows us to do. So I think that was on your mind, and you said you had experiences working with gentrification, and, you know, how does all that come together? Sort of like the, you know, the horror, the hate and anger, and then your own, you know, specific experiences.
Yeah, it's, I mean, certainly, I don't even want to say for the past 4 years, because hate has always been sort of like who we are as a country, and hate has always been this sort of like major engine of politics in this country. But certainly in the past 4 years, we saw this sort of metastasizing of it, and this sort of transformation of lots of hate that had been sort of hidden and was,
But you're, you know, pushed down, right?
yeah, suddenly felt very empowered and confident and in your face. And so, you know, I try very hard not to have hate in my heart. And even though there are many, many things that make me super angry, and many people who do terrible things that I really wish they would stop, you know, I try hard to, you know, sort of not carry hate, because hate can be really destructive. But I also have to sort of reckon with the fact that lots of people don't, and lots of people carry hate, and lots of people take hate with them into the ballot box, and they take it into the halls of Congress when they're making decisions. So this is certainly an attempt to sort of grapple with the fact that hate is a force in the world that makes things happen, usually terrible things. But I also didn't want to come from it entirely from a place of like, that's other, like I'm not, you know, that's other people feel. And so, you know, you know, my hometown is transforming really rapidly. My you know, friends who grew up in Hudson often can't afford to live there anymore. It is a town where most of the sort of like core economics of Hudson in this novel are not, I mean, they're true to as how I understand things. So, and I do feel complicated ways about that. I do feel like, you know, a lot of anger and a lot of rage, and so I wanted to come from a place of, I understand the hate. I'm not trying to say I'm better than it, or that it isn't something that I partake of. You know, again, working in New York City on gentrification issues, you know, so much of it is so infuriating. And I would, you know, I met with elected officials on so many occasions where we would go in, you know, my organization was led by homeless people, and we would go in and, you know, sit down with elected officials and say, this is what we want you to do. And they would just say, oh, it's such a complicated issue, we don't know. So yeah, I certainly have a lot of anger. I understand the anger of folks who are super mad about being displaced, about being made homeless, about skyrocketing rents. So yeah, I think that's where, you know, what if hate became sentient? I think is part of what's going on in this book, is what if hate went from being this sort of like abstract miasma to a visceral force that could act with malice and rage.
And you do a very, you know, back to the Baldwin idea, you're very complex. Like what you were saying is every character in the book has to deal with their hate and their anger and what they are capable of. So you know, you don't, like, there's no innocence in the sense of no one is innocent of the feeling. We're all innocent of other things, but, you know, we're caught up in this. And I think one of the things you point to is how the internet, for instance, has allowed us to, intensify, really amplify. I mean, the internet amplifies the so-called differences between people, right? So, and I think that's a very charged perspective, because we want to be progressive and yay, we're for the future and we're marching along. And so even people are worried if you critique the internet, because that means you're against progress, as opposed to, no, this is a tool, we can critique any tool we have. And so I think you do a really good job of being complex about everyone can deal with their hate or with their anger or with their stuff, and also like look at the tools we have made and how we are using them. So that seems, the tools don't necessarily help us, through some of our issues, right? And they're really great tools for some things and not for others. So, and I'm working on a book about that too. So I was like, whoa, this is great, yay. Because it's a tricky, I think you're going into wonderfully tricky territory. Like the last 4 years have been full of hate, but that stuff was there before. So, one of the things you begin the book with is like the slaughter of the whales. And that, is just sort of a, oh my God, like I lose words, because you give us visceral aids with, really horrific things that happen, and not just to people, right? I love the complexity, and I want to ask, like, so you go from animals to the internet, from, the spectrum, billionaires to homeless people. I mean, you have compassion for all of them. So I applaud that. And I assume that was your intention.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have a lot of things that I feel deeply about, and always keep putting more and more into the pot as I'm writing. And I certainly, I love animals. They always find a way into my work. And there was this really powerful Ursula Le Guin quote that I recently discovered, which said that centering stories centered around animals, or any non-human life, are inherently fantasy or science fiction or horror. They're inherently genre fiction, because so much of literary fiction and so much of this, and the idea of uncentering the human and centering the animal is really radical, and is an exciting thing that I just like to do generally. And I did grow up in a town that was a whaling town, and that did have that rose to prominence by being a whaling town, and that's where its money and that's where its empire and power came from. And so yeah, it's in the soil. It's who we are. It's certainly something that was a big spark for my imagination.
Yeah, I mean, I know the Ursula Le Guin quote you're talking about. I mean, the whole idea that the non-human is significant, that the non-human, we often think we're it, whoever we are, whatever, like I am the one. And, once we have to get out of our, sort of narrow sense of ourselves and go into someone else's or something else's point of view, we are decentered. And I think that's one of the things that you do in the structure of this book. You decenter us regularly. So we have to, there are points of view characters all through it, and I have to shift, like who, like I'm on this team now, oh shoot, I'm on this other team. So it was really, for me, like a lot of fun. It was like great drama, like I don't want to be in this here, I don't want to be here. Oh wow, oh okay, oh all right. So you like dragged me through my own stuff. You let me come to my own conclusions. And particularly, about like how we deal with inequality, because I think one of the things that's, really hard in our country, like it's not just the last 4 years, like you said, the hatred, a lot of the hatred or a lot of the problems have to do with an inherent inequality in, our great American experiment. And we have sort of a mythological sense of, like the American dream, anyone can have it. And then we have the actual, like what has happened historically. And, from queer people to women, to people of color, to immigrants, to a whole range of people who haven't, been able to access all that is in this country. And I think you put that in Hudson. Everybody is in Hudson. So, in terms of, and I think that's in your other books too, the whole sense of like, how do we structure or restructure a society to not repeat the historical, pressures on those groups, and how to make it fun. Like, again, I'm back to the thriller, like, because some people would go, wow, this is going to be like, I'm going to be beaten over the head. No, it was like a page turner that I had to keep. I told it, Sam before, I was like in the middle of the night going, well, you could just read one more chapter. No, okay, just a few more pages. So you really did that amazing job as, writing a thriller. Like, how do you make inequality into a thriller?
I don't know. I mean, to me, it is like, I'm just, why isn't everyone as mad as I am? Why isn't everyone outraged? And why isn't everyone trying to find solutions and thinking of it as their problem? So to me, these are the sort of burning issues that keep me awake at night and stress me out, and that I want to figure out. So that, again, like with most of my writing, I'm trying to make something that I feel really passionate about, exciting and interesting to other people, and also to sort of figure out solutions, because no spoilers for this book. But I feel like, especially when we're talking about monster stories or hauntings or a lot of genre fiction, it's often like, one winner and one loser. The monster is defeated.
Oh. Yeah.
The good guys win, the good guys don't win. And there's, both of those narratives can be super fun and powerful and exciting. But I think the hard work is to figure out a future that both sides have to live in, where the really difficult decisions and compromises have to be made, including the ones, especially the ones by the people who sort of like are the privileged,
Right.
by whatever vector you're looking at. So that was sort of my goal. It's like, not only to sort of have fun, but also like get to a difficult solution, because often, in community organizing and activism, in living in the world, we don't see, positive solutions as likely. The real solutions are really hard. Like,
Right.
Best case scenario is we win an election, and that's great.
But then there's work.
But there's so much work after that. It's if you haven't changed the fundamental mechanics of who has power and how power relates to those who don't, then it'll just be the same conversation 4 years from now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you make, complexity fun. I think right now, people think of complexity as not fun, and I think you make it fun. So because melodrama we know is fun. Good guys win or lose, bad guys win or lose, but basically it's a melodrama because we like have those. There aren't characters that I would say were bad guys or good guys. There are characters who play certain roles or do certain things, but it's more complex than that. And the solution that the characters have to find isn't just to defeat the bad or defeat the good who are trying to get in the way of me doing the bad, right? It's something else. So, and you make that fun. And I think that's another thing that horror can do. You can make the challenges that we face fun, as opposed to like what you were saying about the politicians in New York going, oh my God, this is so complex. It should be, oh my God, this is so complex. Yeah, let's get on it, right? I mean,
Exactly.
And that's possible. Like, how can I gather together the forces and get all the energy going the direction I wanted to go to change this thing? And I think, because history is there, but we also want to talk to the future. And I think you do that in this book really well. And I think you have, like I said, there are the whales, and then there are the billionaires and the homeless people. And then your main protagonist is, someone who's coming from New York back home. And that is a story that, we've had many times, right? The prodigal son returns. And I didn't even think of that until just now. right? That's how, no, literally. Because as I was describing it, I went, oh, that's one of those stories. So that you make it so fresh, um, uh, and also to the particular history of the character, right? Because for some people, people say, well, why are you so distressed with this country? It's a great country, but I'm not living in the same country you're living in, right?
Right.
And so your character, had a whole set of experiences that are really, intense. And this is right at the beginning of the book, so this isn't a spoiler. So, and then comes back to where those experiences happened. Right. And I think one of the things that the readers can do, we all have that, right? Like when I was growing up in the 50s in Pittsburgh, there was intense stuff going on. And, hardly anybody that I knew had gone to college. Now I'm a college professor, right? So just that. But I carry that history with me, and it doesn't go away just because I am a college professor. I still remember that this is the country where that is operative, So I think you do history and the future really well in this horror thriller context, making complexity really fun. So I want to give you a lot of props and say, what are the challenges and delights of writing like that? Because that's what you're doing. So what do you enjoy about writing like that?
I mean, one thing that I love, one of my favorite quotes is about character, is from Tom Ripley in The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. And he says, well, no one thinks they're a bad person. At the end of the day, whatever you do, however horrible, it all makes sense to you in your mind. And that's sort of my motivation when I create characters is, they do terrible things, but they usually have good reasons for them, or reasons that they think are good. And so creating this sort of hot mess protagonist that Ronan is, Ronan has a lot of biographical overlap with me. It's not me, but, He is the son of the town butcher. As I was, his father's butcher shop was put out of business by Walmart, as mine was. His butcher shop was located at 310 Warren Street, as my father's was. So it's not me, but there's a lot there. Trying to sort of imagine the hot mess version of myself, the one that doesn't make good decisions and that hasn't sort of figured out how to sort of come to terms with history is fun. Is always fun to try to get inside the mind of a character. Maybe they're just like you, and maybe they're nothing like you, but that is sort of the fun of exploring characters who do bad things and why they do them. So there's a lot of characters in this book who do bad things. Maybe all of them do.
Yeah.
And so, trying to make sense of that is definitely the joy and the fun and the sort of puzzle of let me put this together just so in a way that's entertaining and fun.
And what's the challenge with that?
I mean, sometimes the challenge is that you have to sort of, at least with some of these characters, you have to maybe open up a little bit of a vein and put a lot of yourself on the page in a way that can be uncomfortable, that can suddenly make you nervous when you realize, oh crap, people are going to read this, and I'm going to have to go home at some point. And
you have to walk down the street in Hudson. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So that can be. I don't usually it's either a gift or a curse that I can usually block that out until it's done, and then it's too late. But that's a challenge. And again, if you're talking about real issues with real people and real world oppression, you have to do it right. You have to be as honest and real about it as you can, and that means listening to both sides and sort of understanding these issues as best you can, and with the understanding that even if you get it right, it still might piss somebody off, and that different people's experiences are really different and valid. Even if I think they're crazy.
Right.
So yeah.
But I think that's one of the things that's very clear in your book, that that you have a respect for everyone's humanity, even if you completely disagree with them, and that, and you don't necessarily approve of what they're doing, but you try to listen to them, right? And that that's a very interesting perspective, because it's not, that you excuse or say what they do or think is okay, but, the understanding allows for, not just, a simple, easy response to who they are or what they do or what you don't like about what they do. So it was definitely part of the fun of the book was thinking, like I said, like, I don't like this character. And you made me pay attention to them and respect them and, still disagree with them, but not from, this position of complete, like, I'm a better human being position. So, it wasn't the melodrama, like, I have my hat and they have the other hat. It was really more like, okay, so I've never really thought of it from that point of view. And that offers me something. So that then I can think about, like, oh, and how do they see me? And what do I sound like when I say this or act this way? And so I think that's a good thing from a book. I really love that. So James Baldwin also said, no man is an enemy to himself, right? So when he was writing Blues for Mr. Charlie, that was one of his lines. That whole idea that, like, so in actors, you can't play a villain. You have to play the character, right? If you play a villain, you're a caricature. But if you decide this character does these things and you come from what they do and how they are, then you can do a genuine character. And I think you've done that with a huge range of characters. Besides Ronan, there's just an amazingly interesting group of people. I mean, this is a book about a group, not just a book about a single protagonist. It's a book about the town, not, and you've done that without, sacrificing the delights of a protagonist. So you give us the best of both. So I wanted to ask you that, what excites you right now? So this is the book that I assume you finished a while ago, right? And then you went through all that wonderful process, and now today everyone can go and buy it. So what are you feeling passionate about writing now? Where are you thinking, or what are you working on?
It's interesting because this actually marks 4 books in 4 years, which is amazing. And I'm so excited and grateful. And, my debut novel, The Art of Starving, which came out in 2017, was my 7th novel. I had written 6 novels before that nobody wanted. So to suddenly have books in the world is still crazy to me.
Yeah.
But also, like, that the writing is not, I wouldn't even say it's the biggest part. It's certainly the most important part, but it might not be the most time-consuming part of being a writer. And there's so much else that goes into it, and so much promotion, and so much thinking and editing and stressing and all that stuff. So
right.
I'm trying to not commit the serial novel offense of just like diving into the next one right away. Okay. So I've been working on a lot of short stories. I'm working on a graphic novel that I'm really excited about. That is sort of like just a pitch at this point, and who knows? I'm trying to speak it into reality and speak it into publication. But that is super exciting, and just sort of like trying to get out of the boxes that I've been in without knowing it. Just trying new things is super exciting.
Right, so graphic novels, short stories, and then waiting and letting stuff percolate so that when you're ready to, go on another novel journey, you'll have all that new experience and new stuff to like feed you as you do your work, right? Oh, that sounds great. Yeah.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, and also all the other books, Blackfish, the title, just help me with your title.
Blackfish City.
Blackfish City, thank you. Yeah, right, which is also, I note that you like sea mammals. So, and I delighted in that. Oh, okay, yeah. I
get a tattoo for every book, every novel that I sell. Some of you may have been wondering what this mammoth is doing behind me. That's actually, this is the novel, the tattoo that I got for The Blade Between, because the villain, if there's a villain in this book, has a mammoth skeleton in his house, because he's that obscenely wealthy. So that's where that person comes from, that mammoth-shaped person. And all my tattoos are done by Bradley Silver. I have to give a shout out at all times because Bradley Silver is a brilliant tattoo artist and does all my work. So yes, sea mammals, mammoths. I have a dinosaur here too from
All right.
from Destroy All Monsters.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't remember what the question was, but that's it. But that was the tangent into tattoo land.
The tangent into tangent. Yeah. So the last question is, what, then we should I think there are questions in the chat or questions that we could, get from everyone else. What what books excite you? What are you reading? What are you,
So I am, the last book that I just completely fell head over heels in love with is called These Violent Delights by Micah Nemerever. And if you're from Pittsburgh, it's set in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And it's a really very twisted, sort of Highsmith, Hitchcockian, twisted love story about two boys who fall in love and obsession and start doing terrible things. So that's the book that I recommend to everybody. I am a huge fan of the anthology New Sons, edited by Nisi Shaw, which you have a story in, which everyone should go out and read because it's an amazing anthology with tons of great stories.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I feel like honored to be in it. So yeah.
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 So yeah, and I've been that it's funny. Someone said that it's been hard. Some people have said that it's hard to read under lockdown, and certainly with the world being on fire and the sort of pandemic and everything else going on around us. I understand that some people have a hard time reading. But I've been reading a lot, and so that's been sort of great. But now that I don't have to go outside anymore, I can just sit around and read. And I also just read Poppy Z. Bright's Drawing Blood, which I had totally missed somehow, and is magnificent. Some of the best gay intimacy and horror that I've ever read. So Drawing Blood, These Violent Delights, New Sun.
Yeah, okay, well, I think we can go to the question and answers. I'm going to see if I can get it. Oh, it just went to huge. So are the short stories you wrote recently published anywhere?
Andrea, do you want to do that? I can disappear again.
Oh, well, you can do it. You can help us out.
Join the fun.
Of course, I will then. But yes, so Andrea just asked Ted's question. Are the short stories you wrote recently published anywhere?
I have a story that just came out in the MIT Press anthology Entanglements. My story is called The Nation of the Sick, which I wrote long before coronavirus. So now I feel weird having a story called The Nation of the Sick. But that's a really great anthology edited by Sheila Williams of Asimov's. I have a story coming out in Nightmare next month, which is called Darkness Metastatic, which is horror. Oh Lord, these are the blanks that one draws at the worst possible moment. There's a great anthology called Recognizing Fascism that just came out that I have a short story in. Yeah, I think that's it. That's all that's popping into my mind right now.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. For things that are unpublished, Patricia asks, would you rewrite any of your unpublished work?
Hi, Patricia. Thank you for that question. No, for right now, I am more excited about the works in front of me than the ones behind me. And I feel like I have a lot more work to do and stories to tell. So I'm not at the moment super interested in those. Some of them I do think about, like, going in to the graveyard and sort of like cutting out this one piece of them that I really liked, and being like, maybe this hand could be grafted onto another body at some point. But right now, none of them are going to be resurrected entire.
So, I mean, you did say that you had written, I don't know, 7 novels already. So for you, that was like real, like good exercise of the imagination and, working on your craft, and you have that. And now those stories, okay, you're going to go ahead and do others?
I think so. I mean, I love, they were sort of like I had to do them. I love them. I'm in retrospect, all of the sort of struggle and pain that I went through of failing to find homes for them was totally crucial part of my journey, and I'm grateful for it. So I thank them for their service, and for now,
now they may rest.
I will let them rest. Yes.
Well, books are such products of the moment in which, in yourself, in which you're writing them.
Yep.
And even if there are things I think that you deeply love about what you were working with at the time, you're a different person later, and it's hard for those things to meet again the way that they did originally. But Corey says, since the last time we've talked, I've been thinking about those past 7 unpublished novels. Do you think you could cut them apart and do your own weird version of Cloud Atlas with them?
Corey, I will do my own weird version of Cloud Atlas at some point. My dinosaur tattoo has the quote, "Our lives are not our own," from Cloud Atlas. It is a super meaningful book for me, but it will not be stitched together from those specific corpses. At some point, I will attempt a book of that kind of ambition and scope, but today is not that day.
Good.
The first question we actually had posed was by Kathy, who calls out the mammoth and says, "I noticed that there is an elephant in your room. What is the connection between your work and the animals or animal imagery associated with each of your books?"
I don't know, but thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I usually try to find at least one animal in all of my stories that I can, even if it's not the centerpiece, that they should be present, and that they should be, having, respect for and love for non-human life is a challenging lesson, I think, that we all sort of have to keep relearning. And so embracing our understanding of personhood and being able to sort of acknowledge the sort of magic and power and agency of non-human life is super important to me. And I think is one of those things that I think is key to us figuring out a way forward that doesn't reduce this planet to a smoking cinder. So, plus they're just really cool. Like, why not add a dinosaur or a mammoth or an orca to your stories? They're super fun.
Yeah, I just want to underline that. I think you're working on us decolonizing our minds. And in that process, animals are objects in our world as opposed to, we're all in a world together. And I think that that's something that, you really highlight in your book. I mean, it happens to be something I'm interested in too. So in Master of Poisons, there are a whole bunch of chapters from the point of view of animals. But it is about decolonizing our minds and the animal other as, object of whatever we want to do with it. And that's how we then also treat other people. So, I applaud that. Yay. And that's one of the delights of The Blade Between.
Thank you.
Just because you were speaking about non-human life and had been mentioning Ursula Le Guin before, I did want to ask whether either of you had read specifically Word for World is Forest.
Yep.
And whether that's,
yeah. Not yet. I know I'm supposed to.
Yeah, read that.
It's a difficult book because it's so much about colonization and the various types of atrocity that's committed against people when their land is being taken from them and their lives are being taken from them. So it's a really difficult book, but I think tonally, I think it's something that matches, that would fit well in a library that contained both of your books. And I think it also speaks very well to that specific quote from her, as well as some of the things that you're discussing. So if people are looking for a next Le Guin book and are feeling strong, definitely Word for World is Forest is a great one to check out. We have lots of questions. This is great. Going back to tattoos, Ted asks, did you get a tattoo for The Art of Starving? And if so, what is it?
That tattoo is it's hard to see and it goes up here more, but it's a tattoo of Moby Dick, sort of like smashing a boat out of the water with 2 people in it. And so the connection to that is a little more abstract. Between that and Art of Starving, there is a brief mention of a white whale in Art of Starving, but it was more, that tattoo is more about my father. My father passed away the same day that I sold The Art of Starving. It's sort of my homage to him, and Hudson as a whaling town, and his sort of love for and identity with Hudson. So it's a less clear connection. Most of my other ones are the animal is the sort of like center animal. The Art of Starving, as those of you who have read it know, the sort of center animal is pigs, and there's an army of pigs at one point that I should have gotten that tattoo, but it was not the right moment.
But I mean, there is also the concern that if you had gotten an army of pigs as your tattoo, then people would think it was a feral hog reference. So, perhaps that's for the
so
best.
Many dangers.
Jennifer asks if you would consider writing more YA fiction.
Yes, I love YA fiction. I love reading it. I love writing it. I don't really know. Like, I'm really bad at genre. I think if you take nothing else away from this, I tend to write things and be wrong about their genre. And so often things that I think are YA are not, or vice versa. I don't tend to have that sort of like brain of like, let me now shift to my YA brain. It's just like, did the story end up being YA? It's definitely something I love doing, and I love the YA community, and writing for young people is really special and exciting. So it will happen. It's a world that I love.
But
really
you wait for inspiration, right? So what comes to you to write is what you write. And so you have a voice for that, and it will come to you at some point.
Thank you. I hope so.
Yeah. I think that what you said about genre being sort of an abstract is interesting. We had Patrick Ness speaking a few months ago, and he was saying that basically, most of his books have a really major realistic element that's just interpersonal stuff, and then there's almost always some sort of like speculative element. But the genre is less important to him than finding things that will make the story he wants to tell happen. So like the dragon comes last, essentially. And I think I think that's a really wise way of doing storytelling, because like the decoration can, if you're going decoration first, it can be much harder to like imbue meaning into that than if you're working the other way around and finding things that will fill out the meaning that you're working towards. So anyway, that's my long unnecessary thought, but but that's really cool. And I did also notice on your website when I was looking for things today to speak about, that when you categorize your books, you don't actually split them apart in any way. And I really like the idea of you sort of personally choosing to interfile all of your books without category tags, which I think is great, because I think anyone should be able to find your books whenever they feel
read them all.
Yeah, exactly.
Start at the top, go down, order them, read them. That's what winter is coming. You'll have plenty of time.
Buy
order,
books,
alphabetical
buy them from
order.
Brookline Booksmith.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Order them
Stock
now.
up.
Oh yeah, I will drop those in. Ted has another question, which I think is interesting. I notice in your novels there are these beautiful moments where the characters at some point either directly or indirectly reach out to the reader in some way. Do you do this on purpose, or is it just something that happens naturally?
Yeah, I don't know. It does tend to happen. It's certainly one of my favorite things. I mean, one of my favorite moments in any book ever is Jane Eyre, reader, I married him. That sort of direct address of like, I'm speaking to you, I'm a person, you're a person, is really special. So it's certainly a neat trick that I see other people do and steal whenever I can. There's no thought. So I don't imagine that there's a super rigorous thought process behind it.
And then Jonathan asks, so much of your work feels cinematic. Any news about adaptations of your work into TV or film?
There is a script of The Art of Starving floating around, and I have an amazing film and television agent who's out there trying to make stuff happen. So, God willing, something amazing will happen. But You know, that would be amazing. That's not my world, and I am not trying to bank my sort of like sense of well-being and accomplishment on whether or not that happens. Like, I would love it to happen, but I'm also real happy over here with the book nerds.
Well, you know, it's not your world yet. Why don't you put a yet in?
Yes,
it's not
fair.
your world yet, but
Fair.
who knows?
Fair.
And does anyone else have any questions in the audience? Because we have pretty much run through all of them, but we have time for one or two more. While we're waiting to see if anybody does do that. Oh, you know what? There's actually a ton more now. Thank you. I'll stop talking and start reading.
wait, before you do that, I want to ask Andrea, what are you working on and what are you excited about?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
sorry to put you on the spot like that.
Oh, okay. You know, so I'm publicizing Master of Poisons, which, as you say, takes a lot of time. You know, so there's a lot of writer energy that goes into that. And I am writing my next book because I'm a chain writer, but it takes me quite a long time. So it's based on some of the characters that are in that short story collection. So I'm using those. So this is Cinnamon Jones, who's a scientist, artiste, and hoodoo conjurer, and it's the continuing drama of her life. She's a amazing character, and she's telling me all sorts of things, and I'm doing a lot of research on artificial intelligence and the effects of the internet and all of that on social well-being and what we want to do in the world. And so I've made circus bots. And I'm having fun, writing the code for them, literally, So, and also all of the, usual things that I want to investigate, the non-human world, queer people, African-American history, indigenous history. So all the things that I want to put in my pot, and there'll be circus spots in there with them.
I'm so here for this. If you need a beta reader at any point,
okay. I will. I back at you so we can exchange. So
sounds great.
If I don't have your email, but I must have it because we've talked. So definitely, I will put you on the list.
Cool.
And I will read yours.
Awesome.
So we have two more questions, and I think we have time for both of them. So first, Padma says, it was interesting to hear you talk about horror as a means to confront monsters that are uncomfortable to confront in real life. I've always felt that one of the pleasures of horror is experiencing the illusion of danger. And can you talk about that?
Yes. Hi, Pratima. Thank you for tuning in. I do enjoy the illusion of danger. I hate roller coasters. And I tend to shy away from physical confrontation. Yes, the sort of safe entering of acting out fear and danger is definitely something that I love doing as a reader and as a writer. I don't know how successful I am at scaring people, but I do love being scared, and so yeah, I think that making us, I think this speaks, Andrea, to something you were saying earlier about making us vulnerable and sort of making us see that we are not safe. Like, we often think we're safe. We tell ourselves that we are, our lives are under our control, but our lives are not under our control, and anything could happen at any moment. And horror visualizes that. Science fiction, fantasy, they can make that real in a way that lots of genres can't. And so that's certainly something that I like, that troubles me and makes me unsettled, is like, oh my God, this horrible thing could happen, but let me explore it in a safe way, where instead of cancer, it's a monster, where the real threats are transformed into something that's easier to stab to death.
Nice and simple. For what it's worth, your books do scare me.
Yeah.
It's frightening to me.
I'm sorry, and thank you.
Yeah, they're chilling.
And I think it would be nice to close out with this question from B, which is, there seem to be really powerful explorations of home in your work. How has your work as a community organizer influenced your storytelling?
A lot. There's a very long answer to that that I'll try to boil down. I mean, one of the again, I worked with homeless people, and I spent many years working really closely with people who had lost everything, or had lost many things, and were living really hard lives where they were subject to really horrible abuse by the police or by the shelters where they lived, or the city, or the education system that made it hard for them to take care of their kids. And I think that one of the things that I learned that was really hard for me at first is that, there's still so much power and agency and ability that folks have in those situations. And so the idea that you can have pretty much everything material stripped of you, and still be like really funny and tell a lot of jokes and tell really good stories and still show up wanting to like hold a protest at a politician's house who's blocking a bill that would get you housing. That's sort of a really beautiful gift of a lesson that home is something that is like a sense of safety and wellness and power and control and agency and love, that you carry with you wherever you go. And if you lose your home, or if your home is unsafe, or if home is a complicated place because your neighbors don't love you or your neighbors hate you or whatever, it still doesn't mean it's like that you don't have that sort of safety and power and love.
I think that's a fantastic answer. Sorry,
Yeah.
Andrea.
No, I was just like, ooh.
Yes, we're sitting with that a little bit. Well, thank you so much for that answer, for this entire conversation. I personally have really been looking forward to hearing the two of you converse about this book. So it's definitely been a pleasure and a privilege for me. Thank you to everybody who's attending. And if you have not bought these incredible books, please, The Blade Between. Both are linked, and we're so thankful for you all to be here tonight.
Thank you, Andrea and Alex. This was amazing. I'm so grateful for both of you, and for everybody who tuned in. Thank you.
And hopefully we can do this live at some point.
That would
I'm
be so
here for
nice.
it.
Imagine a basement.
Yeah.
Beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
I'll come to you anytime.
All right. Okay.
Take care.
Take care.